Hi, Benav.
Hey, Amit, how are you?
How are you? I'm doing good. How about you?
Awesome, doing well.
Great.
Good to see
Wonderful
you.
to have you on our show today.
Yeah, pleasure. It's awesome to see you as always.
Absolutely. I've been kind of seeing you after a very long time now.
Yeah, I remember the last time we met, we had a martini. So
And I actually went back to my office drunk. So
yeah, those were different times. Yeah,
those are the different days. But yes, yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here.
pleasure.
Great. I think that audience have started joining in. So, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to catch up with you all on a lovely Friday evening. I'm your host, Amit Kapoor. And like always, super excited to welcome you all on the 16th edition of our weekly series, We All Have a Story, and which has been run under our digital storytelling platform, www.vastory.com. So for today's session, I am thrilled to welcome Abhinav Goyal, a qualified chartered accountant with over 2 decades of corporate experience. He led large business critical teams in some of the world's most renowned organizations like Amex, KPMG, and Google, and in both India and US. He is an acclaimed motivational speaker, a mindfulness practitioner, success and leadership coach, and an author of two best selling novels. His training and mentoring methodologies rests on four pillars: emotional well being, inspiring people, breakthrough performance, and being at the forefront of change. And he's on a mission to train 1 million youth on leadership skills. Welcome,
Thank you.
Abhinav.
Thank you for that kind introduction, Amit. I'm a chartered accountant, but my friends often used to tell me that I'm a fake chartered accountant simply because my interests never laid in the technical side of accountancy, but more on the softer sides of leading people and helping people. So,
But that's
but
interesting. And I
yeah,
think that before we move to the topic today, I really wish to know a little bit more about your experience switching from a financial
yeah,
professional to setting up I Empower Learning, an organization which focus on enabling students and young professionals to
yeah,
learn and practice
right,
leadership and life skills. And that
sure,
too at a very early stage, right? And a little bit more
yeah.
about your most recent book, What on Earth Are You Doing? Which I read. So I want the audience to know a little bit more about that.
Sure. Well, obviously, my favorite topic. Everybody loves talking about themselves. So, well, it's been a long journey, Amit. I qualified, of course, back 20 years, more than 20 years back now, 22. But and I had a fairly good career. I at there. Yeah. Okay. Just lost the screen for a minute. Okay. So, yeah. So I've had a fairly decent career. Got what I wanted out of this. Chartered accountancy degree that I acquired when I was young. But I frankly suffered from a very severe midlife crisis that many of us suffer from. And it was about my 40th birthday. That's when I had this metamorphosis moment when I realized that half of it is gone, maybe half of it is left, a little bit more, a little bit less, I don't know. And I didn't want to let go of the other half. So I realized that it's important for me to find out what I really want to do, what gives meaning to my life, and uh, what would bring the best out of me in terms of service for others. So that's when I chose to become a coach and a mentor. Also wanted to write books. So, like you mentioned, wrote a couple of books and did my coaching certification, started planning for my second innings in my career. And as I was contemplating what to do, the one thought that clearly stood out for me was I wanted to work with the youth. I wanted to work with children and young professionals, and the youth and universities, etc. Because I feel that's where there is clearly a very strong need for our education system to focus on the real world skills, the leadership skills that we didn't get when we were studying. And I feel that that's been a gap area. So I've created these programs called the Future Leaders programs or the Finance Leadership Mastermind, which essentially help the youth acquire leadership skills or life skills at a much earlier stage than what normally people do. So that's what I do. It's a very enjoyable work, even though sometimes hard,
I'm sure.
but it's enjoyable. I love doing it far more than what I used to do when I was a chartered accountant. And then, of course, the book, like you asked, what on earth are you doing, is really my own journey. It is a bit of a self-help book, but it's more of my own journey towards finding out my purpose in life and developing the courage to live it. Because a lot of people ask me, what made you take this plunge, leaving this high-paying job and entering the wild, etc. But I wanted people to know that it's possible. It's not easy, and but it's possible if you have the structure and the method. So that's what I've shared in this book. In case any of you are beginning to suffer from a midlife crisis, that's what you want to read. So that's been my journey. Sure.
That's fantastic to know, Abhinav. I think that you've been so true and honest here, putting it across very clearly and simply to the audience. And I think that that's also, and I think that you very rightly said, if in the education system there is a gap, there is a major gap, because we do not train and we not make these children or the younger generation aware of what middle life crises are, and they're not aware of, right, that's going to come, right? So even I think that probably the most richest person on this earth, he personally would have experienced it, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody experienced it once, right?
We
And
do.
I think that you're really trying to fill the gap, which is very, very important.
Yeah, it's all getting advanced, Amit. I know this is not the topic for today. We want to talk about recession and what's on the other side,
Yeah.
but since it's an interesting topic, it's getting advanced. I work with youth who are 22, 23, 24 years old, or youngsters who just entered the professional world. I'm seeing the similar crisis happening for people who just started their careers. Just 2-3 years into their careers, they're facing the same sort of dilemma already. So I think it's just the lifestyle which is getting to us. We need to do something about it.
Perfect. I think that we'll pick up this topic in the next conversation because that's also a very interesting topic, and I think that you're a very right person for this. Let's come back to the topic, today's topic, and I think that so today's topic for all the audience, today's topic of discussion is emerging on the other side of the recession, and I think that a topic which is extremely important, relevant in today's world because it has affected practically everyone in some or the other way. So to provide the insights on how we can navigate through this time and keep a check on our finances, we have Abhinav Goyal with us. And so thank you, first of all, Abhinav, for taking time out of your busy schedule and on Friday evening being there on the session. Welcome to this platform. So let's to begin with the session. I think that I was actually going through a couple of articles, and in one of the articles, roaring out of recession, it was found that during the recessions of 1980, 1990, and 2000, 17% of the 4,700 public companies have fared badly. So they went bankrupt, went private, or were acquired. But just as striking 9% of the companies didn't simply recover in the 3 years after recession, they flourished, outperforming competitors by at least 10% in sales and profit growth. So how do you think the pandemic has impacted the market, the current market, and what can be done in order to become future ready? And you could be that part of that 9% of the companies who can recover this recession period.
Right. See, it's a very uncertain world that we're living in. We don't really know what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's a very hard call to make to talk about what this recession is going to lead us into. But it's important to understand that any recession, howsoever good or they're never good, but howsoever harsh or less harsh they might be, they're always cyclical in nature. So after the global financial crash of 2008, we knew that there would be another one. I think the expectation was more centered around 2015, 2016. Cyclically, that's when we expected a slowdown to happen. But it kept getting delayed because of factors best known to Donald Trump, who kept pumping money into the market with reduction in tax rates, etc., to keep the economy afloat and almost on the ventilator. And eventually we had COVID that nobody had expected, which led to this sudden crash. Now, there have been crashes in the past as well, but this crash is a little bit different. It's unique in its own intensity because it just brought everything to a standstill all of a sudden. And historically, there are very few benchmarks to something like this. If you want to compare something similar, you'd probably have to go back all the way into the Great Depression. The slowdown of 81, 82 was a big one. The 91 slowdown was a big one. The economic crash was a big one, but nothing of this sort. This one brought everything down across the world all at the same time. So to project what's going to happen in the near term, or even 6 months or 12 months down the line, it's pretty hard. And I've been trying to read a little bit about it in terms of what the economists expect this recession to wind down as. And frankly, there are all kinds of alphabets that are being thrown around. There's the V-shaped recovery, which is the most desirable one. That's where you collapse and then suddenly rise back, bounce back to the same level that you were at before. And then there is a U-shaped recovery, which most people feel is the most likely one, where we've come down and now we will flatten up and stay here for some time. Eventually we'll start rising back up. And then there's a scary W-shaped recovery, which could still happen, frankly. I mean, if we have a second big wave of COVID, what we are really seeing is we saw the big crash, and then most economies are beginning to bounce back a little bit. Consumption's increasing, et cetera, across the world, especially in the US. But if there is a second big wave of COVID, what we will see is a second big collapse, and that will make it a W-shaped fall. And then the most scary one, which is the L-shaped recovery, which might take years and years, which means there's a structural collapse of economy, and the economy is going to find it very, very hard to get back to its feet for many years to come. I don't think that's going to happen. But the more likely one to me is what they call the Nike swoosh, which is where you collapse, which we've done, and then you rise a little bit faster, and then your rise kind of flattens, and it takes a long time eventually for you to get there to where you wanted to get. So that seems like a more likely scenario. We had 3-4 months of big collapse, and now we're seeing consumption rising in several economies of the world. I was reading recently in US, the consumption has actually gone back in several sectors. It's higher than what it was pre-COVID. Now that's probably happening because the government's given a massive stimulus to households. So the savings haven't been impacted. It won't happen in every country, but in US, for example, it is. But again, it's very industry specific. It's not happening across industries. It's not going to happen in real estate. It's not going to happen in travel and tourism. It's not going to happen in consumer, heavy consumer goods, etc. It's going to happen in more staple consumer goods, so to say. So my guess is there will be different recovery patterns across the different parts of the world. What we will see in India will be very different from what we might see in US, because the macroeconomic reasons are very different. The dynamics of the lockdown were very different in different parts of the country, and the amount of stimulus or the nature of stimulus that different governments are providing is very, very different. So it's going to be unique to every country. It really does depend on what the policymakers now see as the most urgent things to do. At the end of the day, the intention has to be create demand. If we can revive demand, then we will be able to get out of it. As of now, it seems like the demand is, at least for us here in our geography, the demand is still fairly low. And hence we might take longer to get out of it. I mean, the 10% contraction projections that we're seeing are pretty stark. I mean, for a country like ours, which is still a developing economy, a 10% contraction is massive. It leads to significant impact on everything. Who might survive? Frankly, the organized sector is clearly the one that might survive, that probably will survive. Consumer staples are a good bet. Any organization that is manufacturing or supplying services or products which are consumer staples will be in a good place. So you'll have to pick and choose your good apples, and but we're in for a tough time here. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
Right. And what do you think that in what can be done in order to become future ready, as in how we need to prepare ourselves, as in though it has been whatever has happened now,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
I'm sure that this is just not one of the instances which will not come back again. This will come back again as well. So once we
Right.
recover out of this, I'm sure that the organizations have contingency plans, and they wanted to kind of think that this kind of just not economically, also as in terms of as a health issue, which we've seen the kind of magnitude it has,
Right.
in the magnitude that it has impacted the entire globe. These challenges and these outbreaks can happen in the near future as well. How do
Right.
you think that we can be prepared, or the organizations can be more prepared for such kind of a disaster? How could what all things
Yeah.
that they can do so
Yeah.
that they can
I,
do not get impacted by the dip in the economy as well?
Yeah, I think there are two factors here. Purely from an organizational standpoint, Amit, since you mentioned that, readiness is individual readiness, society's readiness, and all that. But let me just focus quickly on organizational readiness as I see it. I think the organizations will have to focus on two critical aspects here. One is technology, and the second is human capital. Uh, in every recession that I've seen or I've studied about, there has been a significant transformation in the way work happens post
Mhm.
any sort of recession. Uh, Earlier, there wasn't as much technology, but now there is. Uh, this recession will also bring about dramatic transformational shifts in the way organizations are using technology. I see this happening already in even small enterprises who are embracing technology like, they couldn't even imagine even a year back. They're talking about automation and data and stuff like that they had no clue about earlier. So because they realize that remain competitive in today's times, they will have to embrace technology. So what are those technology trends which are emerging right now, where which are likely to have long lasting impact on business, is something that all organizations should be focusing on. I'm sure the smart ones are. So you will have to become leaner. You will have to become more efficient. You will have to,
Yeah,
shorten the chains of work, whether it is supply chains, manufacturing chains, chains of back office, etc., etc. So you'll have to shorten all of that. So technology is one. The second thing that organizations need to be very cognizant of is the human capital. What
yeah.
happens in a scenario like this that we are in, which is a white swan event, is
Mhm.
because a lot of organizations are going under right now. The tendency is to let go of human capital massively,
Yeah,
which is what we've seen, right? I mean, all of these
yeah.
jobs
Lots
going away.
of
We've seen about 20 million
redundancy.
jobs in India evaporate all of a sudden in the last 3 months, etc., and across the world too. So this is human capital being let go of by organizations, and you know that. I mean, you know more about human capital than I do.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it takes a long time to build human capital. It
Absolutely,
takes a long
I
time for
agree.
you to get the right kind of people who can do the right kind of thing for your organization, who understand your business, who
Absolutely.
understand your customer, your work ethos, your culture, etc., etc. You build that human capital over a long period of time, and now because of this, incredibly crazy event, you're letting go of that human capital, and once it goes away, it's very hard to rebuild it, and that's going to
Absolutely.
take a lot of time. So organizations, in my mind, need to be very cognizant right now, in terms of how they are going to sustain or hold on to the vital human capital, because this won't last forever. Most recessions don't last beyond 2 years. Yeah.
Yes,
So
yeah.
eventually, in 2 years' time, hopefully, if not earlier, we'll be back at where we were. But if in 2 years' time you are no more competitive, then how would you, survive in or how would you then get the best out of the cyclical boom, which is bound to happen again? So,
Yes.
right now, while the tendency is to cut everything down, to slash everything down, to let go of everybody, be careful about what you're letting go of and who you're letting go
True.
of,
Makes sense.
because, like I said, it's hard to get them, easy to let them go. So those are the two things I might want to point out.
No, great, and very rightly said. And I just wanted to kind of summarize it and make it very clear that the difference maker here, which is very evident, is like preparation, right? And among the companies that stagnated in the aftermath of great recessions, right? Few who made contingency plans or thought through alternative scenarios. When the downturn hits, right? Most of these companies switched to survival mode, keep a deep cut, reacting defensively, uh, adding digital transformation, as you just mentioned. So these are some things, some steps which most of the organizations have taken to ensure that they could sail through any time in recessions, right? And many of the
Yeah.
companies that nearly limp through the recessions have always have a very slow recovery rate, right? And it becomes very difficult for them
Yeah.
to really catch up to the competitive market. So you very rightly
Right.
said here. So moving to
Yeah.
the next
Yeah. And
question, right? Yeah,
yeah.
sorry, please.
No, I was just saying that whether you're a big company or a small company, you need to keep your ears on the ground, uh, because, like you very rightly said, it's not the last time this is happening. It will keep happening, and the chances are, in the new economy, these kind of events might happen more frequently than they used to. So, you need to keep your ears on the ground. I remember when I was working with Amex earlier in my last job. In 2016, I think, or something like that, the organization had set up a huge task force to prepare for the impending recession. And it was really large, the task force, because they wanted to understand what will happen when the big recession comes. It took 4 years for it to come, but they were really prepared for it. So I think that's the sort of readiness you need to have.
Yes, I think that absolutely that is what, and I think that what you touched base is again, human capital is another very important aspect. I think that most of the organizations have not been thinking about it. There are a lot of lays off which are happening in, a lot of redundancies which are happening in, but definitely. So Sachin Dubey, one of the audience, has also pinpointed the same thing. I think that he mentioned that I think organization structure is directly proportional towards retention programs. And I completely agree to that fact that yes, organizations need to think in that aspect. That is very important because you cannot let go your top talent from the organization because recession will not last for too long.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very momentary, and once you and if in case you wanted to be there in the competitive market, you need to have people in the team, the right sort of people,
Yeah.
and the team that you
Sure.
build in with a lot of effort has to be there with you. Great, very
True.
rightly said. So let's move to the next question. So what will the recovery looks like from COVID-19 recession? That you gave in response to it earlier when you said that there are V shape, U shape, and W shape. So you've almost given an answer to that same question. But if in case you would like to kind of emphasize a little bit more
Yeah.
on it in terms of how the recovery
Yeah.
looks like from this COVID-19.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I can definitely try. Because I think we oversimplify this whole concept of collapse and recovery,
Yeah.
because we are too enamored by things like GDP numbers, for
Yeah.
example, right? I mean, GDP came down 23%. It doesn't mean that I came down 23%, and Amit also came down 23%, and the chai wala outside my office also came down 23%. It
True.
just it's a broad parameter. It's a broad index of certain industries and certain kind of organizations. Uh, when I look at recession and when I look at what the potential recovery could look like, uh, I, I I really would like to understand what it would mean to different kinds of people. What it would mean to a Reliance, for example, vis-a-vis a small cloth merchant on the
Yeah.
street. It would
Yeah.
mean two different things to them, right? Uh, the unorganized sector, specifically in India, is such a dominant feature which is underrated, underspoken about. I think the recovery for that sector is going to be much, much harder. Maybe for many of them, it's a fatal blow. They
Yeah.
might not come through. But the recovery for the big boys is going to be relatively much easier. And you can see that already in the way the stock market is behaving, for example, right?
Yeah.
You would wonder why, with 23% GDP collapse, why is the stock market rising and all of that? It's rising because the companies that make up that index are the same companies that will now be occupying all the market space. And India's big demand story hasn't died. It's just slowed down, and eventually it'll start picking up. Who will eventually start fulfilling this demand is the organized sector. So the organized sector will definitely rise up much faster. I think uh, it'll probably be back to where it was in the next 12 months or so, or maybe by the end of 2021. It is the unorganized sector, which I am personally more concerned about. I think that's where the recovery may not even happen, or even in the MSME sector, which is where the recoveries may not happen. What we'll have to wait for is to see what happens with the investments and with the loans. That's what's going to decide which way we go. And the second thing we need to see is the spending, the government spending. because a lot of these businesses will survive if the government spends money. If the government puts some money out there, then there will be demand. And if there is cash in the market, the organizations will survive.
Yeah.
Right now, a lot of us are surviving because there's moratorium and all of that. Once all of this goes away, are we in a position to fulfill our obligations to the banks? If we're not, then what happens? Does the bank start collapsing? Right now, we've not seen any big boys collapsing at all, which is an interesting thing because it doesn't usually happen like that in a global recession. We haven't seen anybody who's worth their name collapse so far. Does that mean that nobody will collapse? I don't think so. I think we're still waiting to see a few big ones fall by the wayside. And when that happens, that's when the real impact will be visible to us. So for me, recovery, well, it's already happening, frankly. If you see the economic indices or parameters in India as well, a lot of green shoots, as the government likes to call it. Demand in many sectors is increasing. It's, it could be revenge buying or whatever people might call it. But the fact is that there is a huge unorganized sector and MSME sector out there, which is not visible right now. And unless we can really, our fiscal measures and our monetary measures are more demand focused, then we are really going to be in trouble. Right now, we are really focusing a lot more on supply and not on demand.
Yeah. So I completely agree to you here, because I could see that the major impact would come to the unorganized sector. And India, as a geography, I think that there's a huge percentage of unorganized business or entrepreneurs which have been running very small MSME, as you mentioned. They have a high impact during this recession. And I think that big players will sail through because they have a contingency plans. They are going digital. They've been taking care of most important aspects of they have leaders who can make right decisions. So they have that decision-making skill right now. They have a control on the debts. So financially, they are more stable in terms of, because they have decent assets with them to take care of. The workforce management is with them. They know that they have meaningful teams to support during this period, and to ensure that there has to be a smooth continuity of work. And definitely the last thing that you mentioned, that digital transformation. So there's a huge, as in there is a huge leap which they've been taking in terms of digital transformation. A lot of things been getting automated, whatever requires an automation. So they've been doing it. They've been cutting down on those steps which you just mentioned about it. So I think that the underlying message across all areas is that recessions are a high pressure exercise in change management, and to navigate one successfully, I think that the company needs to be flexible and ready to adjust. And if in case the organizations who will be flexible enough and are ready to adjust, they will definitely recover out of this COVID recession.
They will. Even the small ones, frankly. I know for myself, when before the recession happened, all of my work used to happen in offices, and I used to go and coach and train people in their offices, and used to conduct seminars and stuff like that. All of that shut down in a day, right? It's your agility in a time like this which decides if you will survive. So everything's now moved online, and some people have been quick to adapt to it, some haven't. How adaptable you are, how agile you are, is very, very important right now.
I think that's going to make the difference, right? So you have everything available. It is just about that how flexible that you are, how adaptable that you are, and how agile, as in how quickly that you respond to situations and you pick up solutions. I think that's something which is very important. So you very rightly said. So let's move to another very interesting question. So what's the best survival or an investing strategy to have during this recession?
Yeah. Are you talking from an individual standpoint or from an organization standpoint?
As in, it is a common question. I think that a lot of people, as in from an individual standpoint also, and if in case you can touch both the aspect, that would be great. That how individuals actually can probably survive. What should be the survival strategy for them, or even for the organization? Because I think that we will have viewers from organizations as well, our decision makers in the organization. We have viewers who are basically as an individual as well, and they wanted to kind of know a little bit more about it. What should be the strategies? Yeah.
Right. See, I think from a strategic standpoint, you should not really change dramatically at this point in time. Strategy means that you have factored in changes over a long period of time. You factored in depressions or recessions, if not depressions, but you factored in some slowdowns and recessions because strategy is long term. So you don't want to flip flop too much. If you have spent time and you've worked with the right kind of people to build a strategy for your investments, whether it's personal or business. Having said that, you definitely need to consider how much risk appetite you have at a time like this, because what you can see is your capital eroding really fast. And that can unnerve even the most calm customers. So what's the sort of risk appetite do you have? What is your portfolio currently looking like, and what sort of changes should you be making? So for example, in case of your personal investments, in a good market, you would probably look at, for example, 65-35 portfolio between equity and debt. But in a recessionary market like ours, you would probably, if you are not unduly in favor of taking big risks, and you want to play a little bit safe, you'd probably look at a 40-60 distribution or a 30-70 even, where you're going more on debt side and less on equity side. So you want to move that around. And then what does your portfolio consist of? Again, from a personal standpoint, who are those people who are likely to come out of the recession in a good, healthy state? For example, consumer staples. I mean, you look at these organizations which are in the business of consumer staples, they are the ones that are safest bet. So go with them, or go with the big boys like we were talking. They will come out of it for sure. There will be ups and downs, but they will eventually come out of it. So work out your portfolio depending on how much risk can you carry, right? And if you are risk averse, then this is not a great time, because there can be wild fluctuations. Honestly, I do think there is another big wave left for us to deal with. Probably will come in November is what my guess is. But so, I mean, if you're risk averse, then it's probably not a great time to be in the equity markets. It's better to be focused more on debt or commodities. They might be better off for you. And at the end of the day, liquidity is the king, cash is king here. So from a personal standpoint, don't block everything that you have, because you might need it. I was, when COVID hit and, all of these hospitalizations were happening, and I was reading in newspapers, they're charging 15 lakh rupees or something like that just to treat COVID patients when there is no treatment available. And I was wondering, for a family of 5 people, does that mean like 75 lakh?
Everybody.
So, you need cash. You need to be liquid. So you need to make sure you have enough of that. And from an organizational standpoint, investments, I mean, what kind of new opportunities do you foresee emerging in the near term? Post-recession is something that you want to invest in. I was working for this big company earlier, and the CEO said, in times which are uncertain, don't bring to me an investment project which has a gestation of more than 3 years. He said 3 years is the maximum that I will listen to, and I agree with that. In fact, in times like this, maybe even 3 years is more. You want to look more and more closer to yourself, because right now, 3 years is just too far out. We don't know what's going to happen 3 years from now.
Absolutely. And I so agree to you. And I've read somewhere that the rule 1 in recession is don't crash the company. So which means that first and foremost, don't run out of money. And I think that's applicable for both as an individual and to a company. Don't run out of money, because recession usually brings lower sales and less of cash to fund your operations. And I think that the surviving this downturn requires debt financial management. Until the time that you do not have that thing adequately being done, it's going to be very difficult for any individual or an organization to survive. So I think that more of yes.
Agreed. So, I mean, I was actually consulting this client recently, and so we were talking about new business opportunities for them. And so they work with the public sector in the government space. They take contracts from governments. And I was asking him, why aren't you bidding anymore? And he said, I don't want to bid anymore, because I only want to deliver what I have, because I realize the government probably doesn't even have money. And if I sign up, if I take up a contract, I will get committed to it, and I will have to burn cash without the guarantee of getting the money back. So I'd rather just survive now and deliver what I have already committed to, instead of actually taking up more work. So there are people like that right now who are playing so safe, and they're not even willing to take up more work when it's available out there in the market, because they feel that the cash might not even come in. So, there are different approaches. This guy is very risk averse. He just wants to, stay afloat till things settle down.
Fair. Thank you. Abhinav, we have a question from one of the audience. Minaksh Sethi asked a question that, does insurance help in these times? Picking up insurance?
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure it does. Insurance helps at any time, Meenaksh, and you need to be smart about managing your insurances. Whatever your age is, whichever stage of life you're at, you need to have a part of your income going to insurance all the time, because uncertain times are the times when insurance is your best friend.
Yeah.
A lot of us almost avoid taking insurance because we don't know when the return will come, or when it'll mature. Why do I think about that long term? I won't even fall sick. Guys, it's happening, right? Insurance is important. At the same time, cash flows are important too. So you don't want to over leverage yourself on insurance or any other financial product to the point where your cash flows are sort of become so bad that you can't survive anymore. So, I'm hoping that you have a term plan, which is critical for anybody in the world. I'm hoping you have a Mediclaim plan, which is a solid plan for you and your family. The one plan I'm not personally a big fan is the unit link plans, which unnecessarily block the money for too long. So that's not something that I'm personally a big fan of. But term plans and Mediclaim plans are definitely something that all of us must have, because we don't know what's happening, and we don't want people whom we love to be suffering beyond a point.
And I think that during this time, I think that this is, so people who have it, right, they probably would have felt secured and safe during these time period. Absolutely right. And I think that Meenaksh, we'll be able to kind of answer this question, that insurances are very important. Do we have Abhinav, we have some more questions as well. So Sachin, to your question, I think that because so there is a question from Sachin, but I think that this is basically out of the topic today. So if in case we will have time, Sachin, we'll definitely gonna pick up your questions. And if in case you have any relevant question, you can definitely bring in right now. So looking to the topic, let's come back to let's move to another question that we have for you. So we know that most of the sectors have been getting impacted by COVID, and according to one of the RBI survey, which I was actually reading, which says that aviation, automobiles, construction, MSME, and tourism and hospitality sectors are most likely to be the hardest hit during this COVID-19 pandemic. So what, according to you, would be the sectors which will get really impacted by this pandemic? And do they have an opportunity to survive? Would they right now should go into an hibernate mode, or they should rather go ahead and look forward to take a long leap right now, and do something drastic, something very different, right, to come out of it?
I don't think going into hibernation mode is even an option. Most of these businesses, if they're sizable, are heavily leveraged. And by heavily leveraged, I mean they have huge debts on their books, so they don't have an option to hibernate. They can't hibernate. They will have to be in business. Some of these businesses will be very hard. Will be obviously hit harder than some others. Airlines have been hit really hard. Though the numbers are going up. I was reading the recent numbers a couple of days back that the aviation minister released, and he said the numbers are going up. And so the airlines probably will have to be really smart, and I'm sure they are trying in terms of cutting down the flab, reducing the low revenue or the low margin opportunities that they were focusing on earlier from a long-term standpoint, etc., and just focus on some shorter term gain opportunities from a survival standpoint, because these airlines, unfortunately for them, are hugely leveraged. And there are massive exposures in bank balance sheets for these airlines. So they are almost too big to fail. There's this term called too big to fail. Most of our airlines are too big to fail because they can bring the banks down to, or at least hit the banks really, really hard if they fail. So airlines are hard hit, but they will have to be very, very careful about it. So are the hotels. Hotels and restaurants, frankly. It's painful restaurant industry in India is the largest employer across the country. I mean, millions of people were employed. All of them got pretty much suddenly laid off. And it will take time for restaurant industry to get back to its feet. Hotel industry, interestingly, is getting back to its feet. I mean, I have a lot of friends in the industry who are telling me, at least, who are showing me good positive vibes right now. I have this friend, for example, who runs a very beautiful boutique property close to Jaipur. It's a gorgeous property, very expensive. And this guy said he opened in June. He opened, I think, June 19th or something, as soon as they allowed him to open. And in July, he did an occupancy of, he said, 72%.
Wow.
In August, he did occupancy of 84%. And he said 84% was at an average tariff of 11,500 rupees plus taxes.
Wow.
And he said, because I cannot deal with 84% anymore, I'm going to increase my tariffs now because I want to reduce the number of people who are coming to my resort. What he's done is he's really been aggressive about it. He's positioned himself as somebody who's taking care of people without going overboard. The problem with a lot of people right now, industries like hotels, airlines, they're going overboard and they are scaring people off. What this guy is saying is, don't be scared. It's all fine. You know, he's almost behaving normal while taking care of people. And I think that's what's helping him. For example, he said 25% of my crowd is coming from within Jaipur. The Jaipur locals are coming. So he's trying out different ways of, fixing it. Hotels which don't overcomplicate matters will probably be the ones who will,
Right.
who will come out of it much better. So that's happening. As far as automobile, for example, is concerned, you mentioned that. Again, I was reading recently, I think 2 or 3 days back, Maruti's numbers are way higher in, I think, July or August, than they were last year's August. So that means, that automobile company is doing better. And somebody had actually, I was discussing with somebody, the point that this person made was that automobile industry will bounce back much better because a lot of people who were dependent on public transport don't want to be dependent on public transport anymore, and they might actually be taking, going in for their own vehicle. So, like you said, even it's uncertain. It's crystal ball stuff. Some industries will surprise us. Some won't. Some entrepreneurs will be smart and some won't. So we'll really have to look at individuals and pockets to determine, what happens to these people. But many industries, they're struggling. My industry is struggling, and I was in the coaching training industry, which really got murdered the day there was a shutdown. Nobody's called me for a training ever since. So I've had to really adapt and come up with different business models. So a lot of those industries have suffered right now, and the real extent will again keep becoming more and more clear to us as time progresses.
But I think that you very rightly said. So we need to evolve, we need to change, and we need to quickly do all that, right? And you rightly said, because I was trying to book a hotel for myself, and I think that all the weekends till next 3 months, it's been sold off for all good properties. I was surprised. I said that I could not find it. I was looking for October and I could not find it. I thought that I have compromised. That means like everything is being sold out. Wow, amazing.
It is. It's happening. Yeah.
So and a very interesting fact. So I was actually reading somewhere that bicycle market, right? So it has really picked up so amazingly well that most of the companies, most of the stores are out of stock.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, again, because a lot of people who were taking public transport earlier, sitting in those tempos and rickshaws and stuff, they don't want to anymore. They feel it's better, safer to have a bicycle for our own, So, new things are happening, It's like they say, the new normal.
So that industry has really picked up, and so it's very nice to see that what's going to happen. And I think that it's hard to predict the future because whatever that fact that we have is basically based on past. Right, so those are the guides that we have. So so this is a very uncertain time. Let's see how exactly this time gonna change. But I think that we all will be able to sail through with some right practices. And now I wanted to kind of come back to you with a question that what could be some steps to recession-proof your finances and recover from any loss that one might have incurred, because as you said that there's gonna be another wave which will come in, right? I hope, it will not be that huge. It will not impact that adversely. People should have been prepared.
Yeah.
So if not this, anything else which will come in the near future, how do you think that people should get themselves prepared? What are the steps to recession proof your finances? And I think that no better than you could give an answer on handling your finances.
No, I'm sure there are many others who are better than me. I wish I knew the perfect answers for this. I wish I had more money, Amit. And I wish I was smarter with my investments. But I think people need to get smarter with their investments. If you have the ability to invest in good times, uh, focus on making the right investment decisions rather than spending decisions. This whole big shift that our society had in the last many years, 2.5 decades, especially the Indian society, towards becoming a very consumer-centric economy society. I think what this pandemic and this crash is going to make us realize is, and it has to a large extent, is that it's important to consider your spending decisions, and people need to be careful about that. You need to save more. The economies which will come out of it stronger are the ones where the household savings are strong. So you need to save more. The other thing you need to consider is leverage. Whether you're an organization or whether you are an individual, what sort of leverage are you utilizing right now? Once again, because of the whole consumer-centric messaging that's been happening in the last 30 years since the liberalization happened, people have been borrowing money like there is no tomorrow, and it's going to become a problem. It's a problem right now in the pandemic, in the slowdown, because so many of us are heavily over leveraged. The debts are what bother us. A lot of people can survive loss of job for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, but they cannot survive
But that's
the whole EMI crisis now. Yeah, I mean, how do you now deal with these EMIs? Somebody will come and take the car away or the house away, whatever. So that's the problem. And unfortunately, what our government is doing right now is giving us more loans. And that's, to me, is counterintuitive. We are already over leveraged. We do not want more loans. We need to cut back. So focus on your spend versus investment decisions when the times are good, because realize they won't always be good. And manage your leverage. Don't over leverage yourself just because there's money out there to be borrowed. Don't borrow it. Borrow it only when you really, really need it. And manage your liquidity well. Liquidity is very, very important in times like this. Those are the 3 suggestions I think.
absolutely. I think that you made it very simple and clear that you need to kind of reduce your debt levels, because that's something which is very important, right? And I think that you need to really take a hard look at your portfolio, because sometimes what we happen is, and that's what we've actually seen. I think that uh, uh, the majorly the people have been impacted because of the debts that they already have in their heads, right?
Yeah.
The EMIs that they need to pay off, because if in case there have been pay cuts, they have been equally cut down in terms of your other expenses. So in terms of you not been moving out, you're not been partying, you're not been celebrating too many festivals. So your overall expenses have been cut down. But if
Yeah.
in case you still had debts on your head, it's going to be very difficult, right? So you can't manage in this time period. So I broadly
Sure.
put it across. If in case we wanted to kind of point out, I think that the best way is to kind of pay down all your debts when you've been in a good time. I think that's something which is very important. So once things would get better, the first thing that you need to do is that have less of debts, right? And you rightly said, when the government is giving more loans, right? So they're actually making people more dependent on extra money which is coming in, and again another set of EMI, right? Which again
Yeah.
going to be very difficult for them to pay back. Uh, Again, boost your emergency saving. I think that one of the good things which has happened in India right now, as in terms of that we've been kind of nurtured that way, that we always ensure that we should save for ourselves. It could be in terms of any other assets. You pick your gold and you keep it somewhere. You invest into properties. You do some sort of investment which
Yeah.
you think that might can be used for your bad days. And I think that's practice which I think the elders used to tell us, that you need to kind of go ahead and keep something for the future. It's something which which people understand it now. That and then I think that
Yeah.
identify the way cuts back, right? Because as you just mentioned, that live within your means, right? You can't overspend right now.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
whatever yeah, so your desires, you need to cut down on your desires and focus more on your needs. And that
Yeah.
is something which
Right.
is hard for everybody right now.
Right. Like somebody famous, I don't know who it was, said this year is all about survival. Let's survive this year, and we live to fight another day.
Yeah. It is about that, right? It is about surviving. It's not about fighting. And if
Yeah.
absolutely, and one more important thing that I want to touch here is like that invest on upskilling and educating. So what you've been doing and what you've been telling, I think learning is another important uh, uh, area or a sector which will probably sail through. And I would say that this is gonna go ahead and get maximum benefit out of this COVID situation. I think that everybody has realized that factor, the importance or the significance of getting upskilled.
Yeah. Right.
Yes. When
Absolutely.
things are getting I can see that very simple example, as in my dad, he never used to kind of go ahead and use any digital mode of payment, right? He has now a Google Pay, he has his Paytm account, he's been making transactions on Amazon. I'm surprised to see that how
Yeah.
digital platforms have been changed and how he himself has kind of upskilled himself to use the new digital way. And I think that that is what exactly all of us need to learn, because our
Yeah.
jobs will get more digital. All jobs, as in I could see, all jobs are getting more techno-functional. So which
Yeah.
was an operations jobs earlier or a financial job earlier or a domain-specific job earlier has now got technology involved in it. It is all getting automated. Digital presence is very much evident there in any kind of a process that you've been following right now. I think that that's something which is very important.
Agreed. Totally. Absolutely.
Great. And so interestingly, I think that we've covered almost all the questions that we have for you today, and I think that it was a great takeaway from today's session, Abhinav, because people been talking about a lot of things, but finance is something, and how exactly that we need to survive out of this recession, that is something which is very important, right? We've been talking about how it has been impacted us, but we do not know how to kind of go ahead and ensure that we'll be able to sail through this tough time, right? And if in case in the future
Yeah.
something similar comes up, any other outbreaks comes up, what we need to focus and how we need to prepare as an individual, as an entrepreneur or a decision maker in the organization. So thank you, Abhinav. I want you to put your last some words of wisdom to all our viewers, that what are the best tips that people can actually uh, uh, at this point of time can really work on things that they need to potentially incorporate in their life to get over the situation smoothly, safely, and financially also
Yeah.
secured. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I think great conversation. I mean, I had a great time, and I hope it helps people and eventually whoever goes through it. Uh, just to kind of finish it up, I think this pandemic is not all horrible things. There've been some good things. All of us have gotten more time for ourselves in this pandemic. So use this time to develop your own self, acquire new skills, develop a new hobby. I see so many of my friends who've developed new hobbies, who become chefs and stuff in this period. So become something different in this period. Develop your own self. Read good books. Meditate. Develop mindfulness. Be cognizant of the fact that this is how it was meant to be, and it won't always be like this. Eventually, it's going to get over. And rather than focusing on acquisitions materially, focus on acquiring more wisdom. I think that's what's going to help all of us eventually as we go through this difficult period that's hurting everybody right now.
I'm sure, absolutely right, and definitely whatever that we've got from you. And so I want to summarize it and make it very simple for all the audience, because somebody might have joined it later. So what Abhinav told us is that regardless of whether the storm is on the horizon, it's always a good time to make sure your financial portfolios is prepared. And I think that if in case you know how to had a debt financial management done for your own portfolio, it's a cakewalk for you, right? So I don't think there's ever a bad time to evaluate your finances and check in with yourself. If someone personally feels nervous that there's a change on the horizon, it's always good time to say that what can I to put myself in a stronger financial position, so that I could have a better sleep at the night when the time
Yeah.
when such time comes in, right? So I think that thank you very much, Abhinav. It was a pleasure to have you on our platform, and it is a great conversation. I think that there are a lot of insightful information that I've also got, and I think that I would start using all your tips and incorporate in my life and try and kind of reduce the debts, understand what are the needs and the difference between the desires, and then control that if in case I can. Let me try. But it
Right.
was a wonderful
I'm sure you will.
conversation.
Thank
It
you.
was a wonderful
Thank you for
conversation.
having me. Look forward to
Oh,
speaking to
thank you.
you.
It's a pleasure is all ours, and I think it's an honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
this.
you very much.
Speak to you soon.
Yeah,
Bye.
yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you,
Take
sir.
care.
Take care. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us today. If in case you would have any questions, you can put it on a comment. We can definitely come back to you. Thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend.